Is everything going okay inside Russia? Things are getting pretty weird as Russia cracks down on anything that could sound pro-Ukrainian, but simultaneously also has more people than ever criticizing the war. It's a weird dynamic. We're going to break it down. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's June 4th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first and foremost, we've got the control map, and there's not actually that many changes. The biggest change that I have been able to see is actually right here, where you can see there's just been some minor repositioning of forces. Looks like Russian forces have moved to occupy this small wooded area here, while simultaneously withdrawing to behind this reservoir. And I think probably, again, I really think this is just repositioning. You naturally, if you're going to defend, you're going to want to use a natural obstacle like this, since you're not going to see Ukrainian forces swimming across it. So you might as well exploit these natural barriers as much as you can. It's a very, very simple decision for a commander to make. Similarly, of course, if you want to establish a good defensive line, I'm surprised they're not using this one, but I guess they were probably ordered to advance to this much smaller. Sorry, we lost it all there. They were probably just ordered to advance to this small wooded area and establish a defensive position. Again, this is not really like a tremendously important repositioning. None of this is really substantive terrain or villages or moving towards an encirclement. It's best thought of as just repositioning. Of course, before we talk about some of this other stuff, I want to shout out our newsletter, the Strategic Sitrep. The latest issue is actually going to be dropping on Monday. Every Monday, once a week, we distill the most important national security news stories in the whole space into a simple, easy to read, digestible format that includes a so what, a deeper analysis that gives you the context you need to understand why a story is important. There's a lot of news articles out there that just do such a terrible job of this. They're either clickbait or they miss key data to really help you understand what's really happening. So that's what I decided to launch the Strategic Sitrep for. So if you're interested in it, again, it's once a week. It's free to sign up. Just the link is in the description. Drop your email, and once a week, it'll be in your inbox. Everything you need to know. Okay. When we look at the combat map, this is where things get a little interesting. One, you can see Russian total engagements remain low, despite the fact that purportedly Chechen forces are supposed to be in and around Avdiivka and Marinka taking over offensive operations, yet Ukrainians are reporting just one attack coming from the direction of Marinka. Instead, you continue to see offensive work by what's believed to be the Russian VDV along the southern flank of Bakhmut, as well as the standard actions you see near Belohorivka. But what's more interesting, I think, is that there are major explosions reported again in Berdansk, and you also have some explosions being reported in Melitopol. Now, Melitopol is significant, right, because it's a major urban area, home to some Russian headquarters elements, at least according to the combat map. You can see here they're saying that the 58th Combined Arms Army is headquartered in Melitopol. So you may be seeing Ukrainian forces continue to soften up and damage the ability of Russian forces, not just to receive resupply from the sea, but also damage their ability to provide command and control, and possibly even damage logistics functions. It's tough to know exactly where this explosion has taken place. Again, but if it's truly in this area, this looks like where you would, near sort of an airport, is where you'd want to pry headquarters, a major command, not necessarily in downtown Melitopol, where it'd be really hard to protect your operational security. But that, I think, could indicate that, again, Ukraine is preparing for offensive operations in this Zaporizhzhia region. Just a theory. Now, what I really wanted to talk about, though, is what's going on inside of Russia. And things are taking a turn for the weird. First off, a Russian Duma deputy. This is a fairly high-ranking elected politician in the Russian state. Now, you got to remember that real power in Russia isn't held necessarily by these deputies in their version of their Congress. It's really held by the Kremlin. That's who effectively selects who gets to run and what legislation is passed. But what's interesting is that there have been increasing numbers of cracks in various public forums, right, regarding the messaging behind the special military operation. The deputy chairman emphasized that Russia has failed to accomplish any of its articulated goals for the special military operation in Ukraine. They emphasized that Russia's officially declared goals at the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, which included the vaguely described denazification, demilitarization, and neutrality of Ukraine, and the protection of the inhabitants of the DNR and LNR, all of which have failed pretty tremendously. Don't know if this was ever really a problem in the first place. So sort of by definition, you can't succeed at exterminating something that doesn't exist. It's like saying that I'm going to remove all the space aliens from the United States. It's like, well, you haven't removed any, so you've either failed or succeeded. Demilitarization, this is just an incredibly crafty euphemism. Yes, when two militaries fight, their goal is to demilitarize the other, i.e. eliminate military resistance. So cool. You've accurately described warfare. And then the neutrality of Ukraine, which is pretty funny because it is less neutral now than it was in the past. But it was not on course to be a NATO member, despite many, many statements by Russia to the contrary. So I don't really understand this one either. And protection of the DNR and LNR. In case you haven't noticed, people in the DNR and LNR have been subject to a lot of Russian shelling. So I think this person's actually spot on that they've completely failed at their goals. And, in a functioning democracy, being able to say those things is important. I think one of the reasons there was so much failure in Afghanistan is because nobody said these things. No one came out that was authoritative and said, we're failing. Everyone simply agreed to pretend like metrics were only good and getting better. And in a democracy, right, the best decisions are made when people with disparate perspectives get a seat at the table. When you have these rigid hierarchies like you have in the Kremlin making decisions, the ability of groupthink to run the show. And the fact is that this person, I think, is probably closer to correct and should be listened to. But unfortunately, it seems like that's probably not going to play out well for them. Right? They've noted that as the war has gone on, the goals have hold less and less actual meaning, and said that Russian forces should have been more aggressive to push Ukrainian forces back from the borders of the DNR and LNR. That would have been they could have succeeded. If their goal at the outset was to carve out the entirety of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts and ignore taking Kiev, the Russian military could absolutely have succeeded. Right, he's he's actually pretty tied into a Kremlin-affiliated discussion club, which is famous for aligning itself with the pro-Putin view. So this is, of course, reflective of the fact that this public view that they're a huge minority for voicing these things. Self-censorship in the information space is extremely commonplace. And this is why the UK is pointing out that some Russian security officials are likely interpreting Russia's wartime legislation in ways that are much more draconian than probably it was meant to be. In one example, right, any display of blue and yellow items is outlawed because it might be evidence of discrete support for Ukraine. In early May, a care home worker was reportedly arrested after wearing a blue and yellow jacket to work. tacky though it may be, should not be considered illegal. In recent days, Russian National Guard troops arrested a 22-year-old man in Volkhov near St. Petersburg for displaying a flag which was eventually determined to be the flag of Russia's own aerospace forces. Right? Let's see what confused the Russian officials so badly. Forces flag. Okay, I can't. All right, really, guys, really, this you really couldn't figure this one out. It's huge. It has two eagles on it. It's the symbol of Russia. Like, look here. Damn, these people are idiots. This is what happens when you have these sort of unclear, draconian environments where no one wants to be the person who is seen as more forgiving, right? Everyone wants to be seen as the most strict, the most ideologically pure. That's how some of these totalitarian governments maintain control. Certainly, you don't want to be accused of being soft on the enemy. And so this is what you end up with. Incredible clampdowns, an incredibly paranoid Russian bureaucracy, especially in the light of Wagner and Prigozhin openly criticizing the bureaucracy, and frankly, even Putin himself criticizing at times the Russian state bureaucracy. Proving your loyalty is seen as being of absolute importance. And you have to remember, don't think like in the West, we value efficacy, right? You're good at your job because you deliver on what that job requires, right? You're good at, you're good at being running a water treatment plant because the water treatment plant never breaks down, right? But in totalitarian states, loyalty is seen as more important than efficacy in many cases. And so even if you have the most well-run water treatment plant in your state or your oblast, it's more important that you toe the party line, that you advocate for the party's interests, that you are unflinchingly loyal to your leadership, which can come in the form of being from the right ethnicity or right background or right region or right religion, depending on the specific totalitarian state. And that is seen as being your ability to actually do your job is of secondary importance. This is why generally we think, or one of the reasons why we think, that oftentimes democracies generally run better than authoritarian regimes, but that's not always true. So one of the critics of these arrests has actually come from the Liberal Democratic Party, an ultra-nationalist, pro-war Russian party, because the party's own branding is yellow on a blue background. So again, a really interesting sort of bizarre turn of events within Russia, and a sign that the Russian state apparatus is becoming increasingly worried and anxious about their role in the war. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. As always, thanks to our Colonel tier members from combatvetnews.com. I appreciate you guys so much. Your contributions really are what enable me to do this every day, bringing you guys the unbiased, straightforward news. And thanks to all of our Lieutenant tier members. I appreciate all you guys supporting me, and I will see you guys in the next one.